Okay, we're going to be learning a Maamar. Hold on, let's put on the YouTube. Okay, we're learning the Maamar of um, Padah Besholom, which is from Yud Kislev from the year Tavshin Lamed Vav. It's a complicated Maamar. We'll do it slowly and maybe take a few weeks till we finish it, maybe till Hanukkah. Slowly, short classes, and try to get through it as best as we can. Bring up the text. So the Rebbe says like this. The pasuk again. This is the Rebbe said this on Thursday. Yom Hey Parshat Vayetze Yud Kislev in the year Tavshin Lamed Zayin, which is about 1976, 70, getting closer to 77. The pasuk. This is because Yud Kislev is the day of the liberation of the Mittel Rebbe. So it says, "Pod Mishal Nafshi Mikrovli Kibiravim Hayimadi." So the pasuk is in Tehillim, chapter 50. That Padah Besholom Nafshi, that my soul was redeemed Besholom in peace, peacefully. Mikravli from the Krav, it's little translation, is from the battles or from the disturbances. Kibiravim Hayimadi, either that there are many people against me or many people with me, depends how you translate the pasuk. The Rebbe says, Shekasiv Zem, this verse is part of the Shir of Tilim of the Chodesh, means if you, one it says, according to the Takanah, they say the Tilim on it's chapter 55. Someone who says one who says as we're supposed to say the Tilim according to the days of the month. So chapter 55, Nun Hey, is Yom Masir Chodesh, is the first chapter of the 10th day. We need to be done in our case, Mashir Yud Kislev, which is today, the day of the Rebbe's liberation, of the Mittel Rebbe's liberation, was on the 10th of Kislev. So the pasuk of Padah Besholom Nafshi is part of the day of liberation. We know that this is the verse that the Alter Rebbe said when he was redeemed on Yutis on the 19th of Kislev, because it was on a Tuesday. So it's also according to the Shir of the day of the week. And the Mittel Rebbe is also saying this pasuk Padah Besholom Nafshi on the 10th of Kislev when he was redeemed. Okay, now as the Rebbe says here in the Maamar, as is explained by the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Friedrich Rebbe, that he says that the Alter Rebbe so too also applies to the Mittel Rebbe, the one who took over the leadership from the Alter Rebbe, that Kedushas Maria Admiram Soi, known as the Mittel Rebbe, the Rebbe who was in between. He was called the Mittel Rebbe because he was between the Chassidim that lived through the life of the Alter Rebbe, the Mittel Rebbe, and the Tzemach Tzedek. Shahayoim, meaning the day that the Rebbe is saying this Maamar 1967 or 66. The day of his redemption, again, the Mittel Rebbe's day of redemption is on the 10th of Kislev. That the Rebbes would say, and that's what the Friedrich Rebbe instituted, that we should all say the Tehillim as it's divided by the monthly division. And also on top of that, in Mizman, sometimes, not always, seems like by Betkufas you do as a certain situation. By Sifu Bamir's Tilim al Shir they would add, besides saying the monthly, they would add sometimes the weekly. So the Alter Rebbe was then in a crisis, in prison because of spreading Hasidus. So the day that he was released was a Tuesday. He was also saying the Shir Shavua, means if you divide the Tilim into 7 days, not the 30 days. Base Masari Teskistev, and on the day of Yutaskistev, he was saying by Safal Shir Achachi, the Rebbe says he was said also the monthly chapters. But also, because of the crisis, he added to that also the weekly division of the Tilim. And he was redeemed on a Tuesday. So he was saying the verse of Padah Besholom, which is connected to the idea of the redemption. Padah means from the word Pedia, to be redeemed. The day that the Alter Rebbe was released, which is obviously not every year this way, that the 19th of Kislev falls out on a Tuesday. But the year that he was released, it fell out on a Tuesday. Like the Rebbe says, Tuesday is the day that says 2 times Kito. So the Alter Rebbe was saying Padah Besholom. So what we have over here is that the pasuk Padah Besholom is connected to the redemptions of the Mittel Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe. We'll move more of it's explained. And Mavar, excuse me, Bal Hagula Bashar Hatfilish Light. In the middle, Rebbe explains about the Pasuk Padah Besholom, which is in chapter again, first verse, that's the middle of chapter 55, sorry. So he says, what's the analyzation of the verse? Okay, this is it's a non-edited Maamar, so it's kind of the way the Rebbe said it. That the points that we're trying to understand in the verse is Shabbatiyah ba'ifin shasham daftidah. What David HaMelech is saying, of course, this is the chapter from David HaMelech of Tehillim, that the redemption that he had was in a way that the redemption came in a peaceful way. It means you could have a sichsuch, you could have a fight, a war, a battle, where you beat the other side. Here he says that the B'diyah, how to redeem in the situation, was in a peaceful way. The redemption is in a peaceful way. The inner B'diyah actually is become a final, because the redemption itself of a situation could be in many ways, in various ways. Meaning non-violent, violent, fighting, etc. This redemption, the Padah Besholom, that the redemption came in a peaceful way. The middle Rebbe explains in Shar HaTefillah, the gates of prayer, in his Sefer, the Shalom Lamitase, what does it mean to be redeemed in an absolute, in a truthful, peaceful way? It means how do you define when you're in a situation and you get redeemed in a peaceful way? Then you could have scars, you could have pain, you could have what's known as yisurim, sufferings. It means you're redeemed, right? But you're bloody in the battle. So the idea of Padah Besholom is, what does it mean to be redeemed peacefully? That it's not done in a way where there's any yisurim, there's no pain, there's no suffering. The word shalom could also, in this case, mean not just that it's peaceful, but also in the way of peace or completion. Shalom could also be completion, but also that it's in the way of shalva and tranquility. So he says, why? Misunderstood. That what does it mean that there's a redemption through peace? Means that redemption is not a way, this has to be understood. It means that by definition, redemption means there's a situation. But there's a situation there could be a situation that's not a war, but a situation of change without battle. He says, it means that it's not in a way that there's that there's a battle. When you're victorious in the battle. How do you get out of the situation? There's no pushback. The situation's there, and you transform the situation without a battle. Means the situation has to be changed. So you have sometimes where there's a fight. I don't want to change. I don't want to release. I don't want to release the hold the impurity has in a situation. That's in the case of Padah, redeeming something. The word Padah means to redeem. A force could hold something, and the force that's holding it says, I don't want to let go. So how do you fight it? How do you get it to let go? You have to fight it. So he says, no. The way we let it go is peacefully. It means you confront it, and it gives and it releases it without a fight. He says, Kim Shahaya Padah, the release, the redemption, Shalom in a way of peace and shalom. Okay, so we're going to say, we have to understand at what time are we talking? What is this applying to? In what situation? And what's the middle Rebbe saying? In the first paragraph over here, what the Rebbe is explaining is, first she's teaching us what's the connection to the verse of chapter 55, towards the end of chapter 55, when King David talks about Padah Besholom, their redemption, and it has to be Besholom in a peaceful way. And my soul, Padah Besholom Nafshi, my soul was redeemed in a peaceful way. First of all, what's the connection to the 10th of Kislev, which is when the Mittel Rebbe was arrested for his spreading of Chassidus. Those forces who went out against the Mittel Rebbe. He was arrested on the 10th of Kislev. He was arrested and he was released on the 10th of Kislev. A day after his birthday on the 9th of Kislev. That's why we have the celebration, the 9th and the 10th together. Because the Mittel Rebbe said the Tillim daily, monthly, and the 10th of the month, which is the day he's released, has chapter 55. So he was saying the chapter about the redemption in a peaceful way of his soul when he was being released, like as the Alter Rebbe, who was saying also on top of the monthly, he was saying the weekly Tehillim. So the Tuesday, which is when Kislev happened, the Alter Rebbe was arrested. His redemption happened on a Tuesday. He was saying Padah Besholom. We have the letter that the Alter Rebbe writes. That while I was saying the chapter 55, and I was saying the verse Padah Besholom, that's when I was given the information that he was going to be released. And so the idea is that now he analyzes that. What's the middle Rebbe explain? What does it mean Padah Besholom nafshi? That my soul was redeemed in a peaceful way. That although there could be forces that are trying to hold something or someone back, instead of putting up a struggle to redeem it, and from that could be that in a fight, A, there's a battle, and number two is there's casualties and consequences of battle, which can mean pain, sufferings, etc. So there's no pain and suffering. The redemption, so to say, the redemption happens in a peaceful, Shalom, complete, peaceful, and Shalva tranquility. Okay, so I was going to explain. For any new, the idea is like this. We're going to do this slowly. It's 11 pages, this Maamar. Gets in some deep ideas, which are ideas basically to bring this idea of the Padah Besholom into the final redemption, connecting it to the parish of the week. So any new, the idea is like this. Again, today's the 4th of Kislev, so the 10th of Kislev is going to be this following Sunday. So the 9th is the birthday and the yahrzeit of the Mitzvah Rebbe. And Matzei Shabbos Sunday is the Yom HaGeula, the redemption of the Mitzvah. So the idea is like this. What does it mean when you have to have redemption? You have to release something, but you do it in a way of battle. And avodah Hashem. It means not talking about physical battle. What's this mean in our service of God? Avodah iskafia. That's represented in the concept of iskafia. Iskafia is the term used of restraining yourself. When a person has urges within the world, right? The Torah tells us what we have to do. The Torah tells us the halachas. These are the 613 mitzvahs, the 248 positive commandments, 365 transgressions. And then you have also the sanctify yourself, permissible, the idea of always making, not within permissible itself, within things that are permissible, to make sure you're constantly focused on avodah Hashem and with purpose and meaning, etc. And you have sometimes a pull that you don't want to do that. So how do you restrain? How do you overcome it? You restrain yourself. If you have a pull towards something, you want to do something, you control yourself not to do it. That's called iskafia. It's not that you've transformed yourself, that you have no desire to do something that's negative or something you shouldn't be doing now, even if it's permissible, but something you shouldn't be doing. So what force do you use to stay on the path, to stay with it? Is iskafia. You restrain yourself. You don't allow yourself to give into your temptations. So that's a battle, because the other side is battling. You have a temptation. You have to fight it and beat it. That's called iskafia. That's restraining yourself. That means if that's a battle. It means you redeem yourself, you won this battle, this specific battle. That's the vote of the Beinoni, like Tanya says. You're constantly struggling, and you have to be iskafia. You have to restrain yourself. So that's a battle. When you're coming, when the approach is, when the way you could win this moment is through restraining yourself. Nishares adayin u'tzia shalom. The opposite side, the force of the pull towards the negative, towards what you shouldn't be doing, is still there. You just beat it. That's battling against what holiness wants you to do at this moment. But it nullifies itself in this victory. At least in the action, maybe your heart and desire still wants to go. You maybe haven't transformed the emotional connection to that thing that you're restraining yourself. But action, you don't act on it. So in the Maisa, at least in the action, you've won this battle. The Maisa week, at the end of the day, comes down to action. Did you do what you're supposed to do? The restraining yourself doesn't only mean restraining yourself against a transgression. It's also a mitzvah saseh. You don't want to give tzedakah. You overcome the blockage that you don't want to give tzedakah, and you give yourself tzedakah. So that's also a skafia. That's a skafia in the positive. You daven. You go to shul. You learn, right? The Avodah Hashem. So even there, you're learning a little more. Different levels of the skafia. So the ma'aseh then comes down to the action. Did you do it? Didn't you do it? Did you not do it? Did you not do what you shouldn't be doing? Did you do what you should be doing? V'hinei afal pisha yidei havodah diskapi nifel inin habirurim ba'olam b'maaseh poel. Although that you've accomplished something with this restraint by either doing what you should be doing or not doing what you should not be doing, and overcoming the temptations of going against what Hashem wants in those situations. So you've accomplished a birur, and you separate by restraining yourself. You've separated in the world, at least through the action. Like we said, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the action. But you haven't means birur means what at the end of the day is that's the avodah. The avodah is to be mirvar, to separate good from bad, and you've separated good from bad by restraining yourself and doing what you should be doing, or not to be doing what you shouldn't be doing. But it hasn't done a birur b'shleimus, he says, because the other side is still there. There's a higher level of separating the good from the bad. Where there is no longer the forces of evil, you've transformed the energy to be now an entire situation of positivity. Now, in Chassidus, this is a long discussion, because at the end of the day, is as far as the person doing the avodah, there's what to be said about restraining yourself, where you're going against the force, and there's what to be said about transforming the situation. But once you've transformed it, you no longer have the temptation. But as far as the bottom line goes, there's still a force of evil. So therefore, he says, not only to restrain yourself, but even when you transform, there's still a battle. Why? How do you come to a situation of transformation? It's by, I'm just going to bring down the page. It says in this last week's parsha that Rivka is told by Shem that there's going to be a force. The forces are going to fight against each other. So first there was a force that was negative. First you had to restrain yourself. But only afterwards you came to Zapcha. Means by definition you transformed. Then the word transform means there was something that was negative and you transformed it to positives. But in the beginning it was negative. So there was still a battle. So though the battle in Iskapia, it's even after you've won, there's still the force of evil there. You just beat it and you pinned him down, so to say, pinned it down. And in the Avodah Vishapcha, you've transformed it. It's no longer an enemy, but that itself is a process. Initially, it was an enemy, so it's still a battle. Shahara Nepech L'Tov. Afterwards, you've been able to turn the bad into good. What does it mean, Hishapcha? Just stop for a second. What does it mean to transform something? Meaning to say is that you have, for instance, within the Nefesh Bahamas, we have the animal side within us, and that has that kind of urgency, that energy. Like we say, sus v'rach v'yirama v'yom. When we talk about this, there's the rider and the horse. The horse is the nefesh bahamas. So when you could control the horse in a moment, you could turn the horse into being a force. That same energy it has that's pulling you towards negativity now only wants to go towards positive. In general, that's more the avodah of the tzaddik. The tzaddik who reaches, a beinoni obviously can have moments of transformation, but 100% transformation by definition is not a beinoni. The beinoni always has the struggle. You could transform a moment, a situation, and now that your entire energy is focused on positivity. But sometimes you don't have that. You still have the urge. You're still struggling. You don't want to give the tzedakah. You're not standing there willingly to give it, but you fought that push. You fought that energy and said, no, I'm not going to give in to not. I'm going to put my hand in my pocket. I'm going to give it. Although even while you're doing it, it's a struggle. You could have a situation where you're willingly giving, and that could be for that moment. Then there's the general ishapcha, the general transformation of your whole being, that all your midos, your attributes, your nefesh bahamis, your total animal soul becomes transformed to a positive energy. But at the end of the day, that's a process, and initially it's not like that. So the idea is shara nefesh chatoyev. We need to say shegam inyan ha'aficha l'toyev b'yedei b'chomer. How did you transform something that now it's a force of good? It also comes through a battle. Well, it gives an example by Asa. Even at that moment, Yaakov was able to affect through the gifts that he sent him. It's not bribes. It was as we learned in the Maamar of Vayishlach, the gifts that Yaakov sends Asa affects that there's a transformation, that he kisses him, and there's an argument. Did he really kiss him with full heart or not? And Rebbe He usually says that halacha Esav son of Yaakov, at that Esav hates Yaakov. At this moment, he kissed him 100%. Shuvinin his hapchotay, at that moment, he was transformed to good. Mikol Mokim, but that came in the process. His hapchazu bala achri shahayi kamatach belois. Yaakov had to do many kind of schemes, dividing the camp, the bowing, the sending the gifts, go with the medrash, the malachim, the angels that sent and gave him a shtickle patch, whatever it is. But there was a process that had to be done. The Yaakov had to do the tachbulais, the schemes, the planning to reach the Esav Shekissim with a full heart. Not only that, Yaakov himself had a fight with the angel of Esav. And only when he wins that battle, but it's a battle, he becomes Yisrael. And what's the name Yisrael? That you become a master over Elohim, the angels and the people. But that only happened through a process of a fight. He has to struggle with it. Differences that once you've transformed something, or situation, a person, there's no longer the negative afterwards, but to get there is a process. Now that he's no longer an enemy, he's a friend. The Nefesh Abraham, the animal, becomes your partner, but that came through a battle. How do we get that? In it comes not just the battle, but with it, the Rebbe says, is Yisurim, is pain, suffering, pain, and battle. That's not the Padah Besholom. Because at the end of the day, they're scars. What does it mean to have an absolute, complete way of, what's the complete way of doing, a redemption? There is no pushback. You face Esav's angel, and there's no fight, there's no battle, there's no Yisurim. You don't have to go through suffering to get there, and you don't have to go through pain. The whole transformation happens. There's a confrontation, but as soon as the confrontation, when you confront it, it's transformed in a peaceful, tranquil, in a way of tranquility. And Shalom means not just peace, but it's a complete way of transformation. Meaning to say is that what the Rebbe is saying is over here that if you have to, that it's not only what happens, it's how it happens. So just like to mishapich, to transform something, at the end of the day, it's complete. There's no more enemy. There's no more force against you. But that itself took scars. That took a confrontation of fighting. It's even more so when you're restraining yourself, because it's you're restraining against the energy that still hasn't been transformed. But at the end of the day, the common theme over here is that in order to get to something, you had to go through battle. A complete transformation a redemption is that the confrontation has absolutely no battle, no scars, no pain, no way of tranquility. Although the King David, in his time, he's the 14th generation, right? So at the time of King David, he'd already started to reach getting towards the level of Kaima Sir Bashla Musa. The Smoon is at its fullest, like the 15. David did it through the victories, but the victories of his battles. They come up in Kivan Shabirun Shalai Hayade Machamas, but he had a battle to get to these accomplishments. His days, even after the ends of his victories, towards the end of his life, when he already accomplished all these victories, we don't call his days of peace and tranquility, because to get there, there was a lot of blood spilled, there was a lot of suffering, there was a lot of battles. The Dafkiv and the Gale Shlomo, only when his son King Solomon on the 15th generation, then God tells David that he's going to build the temple, because who Yish Menuch is a person of peace and tranquility. Shalom, Sheket, Etein, B'yamav, and it's going to be peaceful in his days. Now, mitis in Menucha, what is the true level of calm, of Menucha? The true level of peace and tranquility and Menucha, calmness, that he was able to achieve is only Shlomo Melech, because he did it without battle. There was no battles at all. The time transformed to a peaceful, menucha, calm time. And why wasn't there any battles? because there was no enemy. The enemy was totally transformed by the being of Solomon without Shalom and Melech having to fight for it. That means that the person who you would have to battle is no longer an enemy. You can't even say transformation. There's no transformation. There was no enemy. As soon as Shalom Melech wants to do something, he does it. Because there's no idea of an enemy, no force that's fighting against. Right? Let's stop here. He's going to go into the next. We'll stop here. And he's going to continue with the Maamar. He's going to get into the idea of what is the peace and how it applies to this week's parsha, the Yud Kislev, to the final redemption. Thank you so much for joining. Bez Hashem will continue tomorrow.